Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, June 12th, 2018. I'm going to open the meeting at 7:30. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Kucera?
Here.
Mr. Audia?
Here.
Ms. Fenton?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson? Mr. McHale? Ms. Prowse?
Here.
Ms. Scripture?
Here.
Mr. Shepard? Mr. Watson?
Agenda item number 4, I'll need a motion to approve the regular minute meetings from the May 22nd meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes from the so-said meeting.
Support.
I have a motion, I have support. Any changes, corrections, deletions? As is. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Audia?
Yes.
Ms. Fenton?
Yes.
Ms. Prowse?
Yes.
Ms. Scripture?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes. Agenda item number 5 is discussion of proposed amendments to the land development regulations. Mr. Elliott?
Good evening.
Evening.
So you just got these today. These are some housekeeping things that have been sitting around in the building and planning department for some time. And I promised I would do them since we had nothing really for the agenda tonight, but I couldn't get them done until today. They were not ready on Thursday, so what I thought I would do is, since these are just for discussion, pass them out, walk you through it, and then you can study on them at your leisure and bring it back at a future meeting for further discussion, and then ultimately a public hearing when you think it's ready. So if you have those in front of you, I'll just walk you through. Do you have one, Maya? Is there an extra one sitting up there somewhere?
No, sir. Oh,
I've got it on my screen.
is this part of your housekeeping, Michael?
Me?
Yeah. Well, I heard you were in another thing. You were going through ordinances and pulling out old stuff.
This
or-
one's not.
No, these
I didn't know
are
about
zoning
these.
ordinance. So these all
I didn't know.
relate to the zoning article. So as you may know, Chapter 34 is broadly the land development regulations, and then Article 10 is zoning. And so what we did is, you'll see as we go down there, starting on page 1, you see as we go down in there that there was sort of a hodgepodge of different things, an attempt to recite state criteria for child care facilities, which was unnecessary, and we cleaned some of that up, but there was no definition of child care facility, and so I put the state's definition in there to go in the definitions, and then we're also substituting within definitions the definition we've already talked about for home occupation, the refined definition of home occupation that we've already discussed, I think, 2 meetings ago. The next one, I haven't labeled the parts yet because I was moving them around, but there are 2 different, so the Zoning Board of Appeals has the ability to approve temporary uses. And it talks about, the ordinance talks about that in 2 different places, section 34.542 and also in 34.1049. And they say 2 different things about how long such a use can be approved for. This section said 1 year, and 34.1049 said 6 months. Since it is a temporary use, it wouldn't seem like you could continually approve it for a year after a year after year after year, so I went with 6 months. In order to be consistent, you could modify that, but if you're going to modify it, then you'll want to change the other section where it's referenced as well.
Why would that come in front of zoning and not planning?
That's the way it was written. I didn't write that part. Mine is not to explain why.
Well, temporary buildings and uses, Christmas tree sales,
Okay,
you know,
that kind of a use, okay.
yeah, tent sales, stuff like that. So that's what That's
I
why it
think-
was thrown under the ZBA's authority.
I think what happens is, it kind of overarches over all districts, right? It's potentially allowable in any location, and so rather than treat it like a special use, whoever drafted that thought it would be like an appeal to the, similar to the powers that the ZBA exercises on appeal.
Okay.
I don't know, that's just my speculation. So then, amendments to the administrative site plan review process, we also touched on 2 meetings back. So I just recited those, and then I tried to make some of the tweaks that we had talked about a little bit. There may be others that you want to make, or that Jim has in mind. But what I included was allowing for resurfacing, but not the complete reconstruction of a parking lot. And then in minor facade changes, the addition of new windows as distinct from new doors, which it previously didn't allow windows or doors. And I think our discussion was kind of along the lines, well, how can it, if they're architecturally consistent, how can it be a bad thing to have more windows in a building? It seems like a good thing. Anyway, you may want to do more with that, but that's what I put in there for discussion. The next district we get to is the single-family residential districts. So we've restated here the permitted and special land uses and the development standards for that district. And so I tried to clean up the treatment of state licensed residential facilities. On the one hand, there were these different criteria. So the city must permit, cities and townships are treated differently under this statute. And as a city, the only thing you must permit in a residential district is a state licensed residential facility for 6 or fewer people, basically, adult foster care home. That's allowed wherever residential use is allowed. And so we don't necessarily need to say anything about that, although I do think the ordinance says something about that in permitted uses. But beyond that, you're at your discretion. And so you had included 2 categories there with some different spacing criteria. And what the definition tried to do currently was like combine up group daycare homes and state licensed residential facilities, which are 2 totally different things. And so I separated those out. I treated only the state licensed residential facilities, and I provided for them as a special land use when they serve 6 to 12 persons. And then I eliminated the provision for facilities larger than that being in a single-family residential neighborhood. And then I separately allowed for group childcare homes, which are up to 12 children, as well as what you currently allow, which are childcare centers that are associated with a school or a church or in a building that was formerly used by a school or a church. And then I just got rid of the attempt to restate some of the state's licensing criteria for childcare facilities, which are, I guarantee you, far more voluminous than those 4 or 5 paragraphs. And it really is not necessary to restate them. The state inspects for those things.
This section of the ordinance hasn't been updated since I've been here, so I assume these mirrored the old state law from 22 years ago.
And then going on to the development standards for the district, I took a shot at doing your garage door ordinance. I may have been overly generous. In Jim's view, I was overly generous of the percentage of the front of the building that could be occupied by a garage door. So you might want to tweak the 40% that I provided for.
Almost half.
It's almost, but not quite half.
I
So
recommend
the one that I went and
25%.
looked at was about 75%, so this is better than that, but you may want to adjust that, to be more to your liking, but that's what I threw in for discussion. And then the RM1 district, which is the low-rise multifamily residential district. Similarly, I took out the reference to in special, these are just the special uses. I took out the reference to large and group homes, and then did the same thing that I had done with the single-family district in terms of defining those, although I did allow, I believe here for the larger facilities in the multifamily district. And then childcare facilities I just simply provided for as they're defined. In the multifamily district, it seems like any size childcare facility could be accommodated. And the next section is to eliminate the office research district, of which there is no land currently zoned. So it doesn't seem like we need it. And under the new master plan, our concept is to provide districts that mix more uses, not distinguish between them and compartmentalize them. So I didn't imagine that you would need that district going forward. So there's a few, there are some other districts like that that are obsolete, and they're not in here, but I'll talk to you about them so you're aware. The new master plan contemplates a new mixed-use district that would go west down 14 Mile Road and then also south down Main Street. And it would go west as far as the Westgate District, and it would start going south on Main Street beyond where the downtown master plan contemplates the new central mixed district and go on down to the city limits. And so part of that area now is what's called BRD 1, which hasn't, in the time that I've been here, it's been difficult to locate things in that district. It's precluded a lot of things that seemed like reasonable uses that wanted to go in there. And so what I think you would do going forward is when you create that new mixed-use district, you would apply it to both those areas, and you'd get rid of the BRD 1 district. At that point, you'll probably want to rename BRD 2, since there will be only one BRD at that point. But that can't be done yet, because there is land zoned BRD. There's also land, weirdly enough, zoned B2, which is downtown, but those districts are not downtown. They are, there's one out west 14 Mile, and there's one out east 14 Mile, nowhere near the downtown. Jim wanted me to get rid of that district, but I found that there was still land zoned to it, and so you're going to have to rezone that land to something else first, and it makes sense, at least as relates to the one that's out west 14 Mile, to wait till you have the new mixed-use district, and you can rezone all that land to mixed use. There's an RM2 district that you have that's a high-rise district, and it's, hesitate to say this on mic, but it's basically a spot zone. It's only the high rise, obviously. And so,
Because we're not letting any more of that happen.
right. Well, and so the question, occurs to me: do you really want more high rises? Do you need that district, or if that's the only high rise you ever intend to have, why wouldn't that just be subsumed within the city center district, to which it's, I think, adjacent, and then you could get rid of RM2 as well, because I doubt you really need it. In reality, you don't intend to have more high rises.
I got lost. What page are we
Where are
on?
we? Yeah.
We're on no page. You missed my prefacing remarks where I said none of this is in here, but I'm going to tell you about all the other districts that I didn't get rid of. And then the last district that I didn't get rid of that is also sort of obsolete is the I2 district. There's no land that's general industrial. That's the most intense industrial district. There's no land that is currently zoned to that. However, I was hesitant to get rid of it because it includes things that really aren't allowed anywhere else, and that you might want to have provision for, should you ever find it appropriate to create a place for.
Wouldn't it be like around the Anderson Court area there?
No, so the area that's designated for industrial going forward would be up on North Rochester Road.
Oh, okay.
That's, I think, the only area that ended up getting designated that way in the future land use plan. So those are not, none of those are in here, but they're things to think about going forward, and depending upon how much energy you have for this particular text amendment exercise, maybe you want to embark on some of that at this time. Then we just tried to clean up the local business district a little bit. These were just some notes that the department had in terms of, you know, sort of obsolete language. But then also I included in the permitted uses amongst the other personal service type businesses, massage therapy, which we discovered when the council was working on their massage therapy registration ordinance, that while there was a definition of massage therapy in the zoning ordinance, it's not allowed. That is the one and only place that those two words occur in proximity to one another in the entire city code, and so it's not expressly allowed anywhere. And so we put it in there with that's the way it's been done. I mean, there are massage therapy businesses in town, and the city has always looked to see where other personal service businesses like barbershops and beauty salons and such were allowed to determine where it would be permitted. And so it just makes clear that that's where it's allowed. And then that has knock-on effects, as you'll see as we go on, because we reference the B1 permitted uses and some of the other cleanup amendments that we did. And then the other new addition in B1 is the accessory parking of mobile food vending units when occupying off-street parking areas not required for principal uses on the site, otherwise known as food trucks. And I don't know whether the mobile food vending ordinance has been passed yet, not yet, but but it soon will be, and then we need a place for them. And that ordinance, and so that, as you may recall, has two parts to it. There's the public property where food trucks will be allowed. That's up to council. They decide, and they have decided, I think, already to allow them at the parks and at the school sites. But then the ordinance contemplates them being allowed on private property wherever the zoning permits. And so in drafting that ordinance, I always had it in my mind that they would be able to park in the parking lots of business areas. And so I've included it as a permitted use in B1. You'll see as we go on that then B1 uses are also allowed in B3 and BRD2. And so those three districts would be places, if they have excess parking only, because they can't take up required off-street parking, that mobile food vending units or food trucks would be allowed. Special uses, we made a little tweak to veterinary hospitals, which otherwise were supposed to be 100 feet away from any residential district. The way that works in practice is that there are therefore no places where veterinary hospitals could be. And so we instead said pet runs shall be set back at least 100 feet. I think that was more the intent, that there not be disturbing activity in close proximity to a residential district. You may even want to think about the 100 feet and whether that's necessary. Then again, the same simplification to child care facilities. So the next part is B3 allowed uses. We just cleaned that up. There was a lot of redundant language. It just restated things that were allowed in the B1 district and the office district. So we just said the uses that are allowed in B1, subject to any conditions associated with them in that district, and in O1, subject to any conditions associated with them in that district. Then retail businesses generally. We added artisan studios and galleries as an expressly permitted use. Jim, being a lover of motorcycles, wanted to make sure you could sell motorcycles where you could sell cars. So put motorcycles and scooters in there. as well. It did not seem to make sense to me to have family daycare homes be a permitted use in the B3 district, since there are no homes in the B3 district. So I
Sorry
believe-
to slow you down while you're on a roll. We were talking about, well, the B1 being eliminated in the future. So when
no,
that gets
I-
eliminated in the future, are we going to have to alter these ordinances?
I don't think B1 will get eliminated in the future, because there are other areas along Rochester Road and east on 14 Mile as well, I think, where B1 is used. And those aren't areas that are contemplated for the mixed-use district, only West 14 Mile and South Main. So I
Okay.
think you'll end up keeping B1. Otherwise, I would have pushed it to the side and said, don't have to worry about B1, because we're going to get rid of it. But I don't think you'll get rid of it. It's intended to be in those areas that are close proximity to residential. And then the special uses for B3, all we did there was the simplification of childcare facilities, as with others. Moving on to page 15, which are the permitted uses in the I-1 district. These were really just some clarifying things, and then again, didn't feel like family daycare homes were probably needed in the I-1 district. So I got rid of that, and this is over on page 16, and I added in its place indoor recreation uses occupying not less than 7,500 square feet. In other words, those that need a big building, those are often only practical in a light industrial district.
For number 10, should that read clean and free of nuisance or high hazard?
Generally clean and free, yes, it should read of. Good catch, good eyes. Off-street parking is the next section. I put some language in about commercial or larger vehicles that should not be parked in 1 and 2 family residential districts that I didn't see addressed in the ordinance currently. I got rid of some superfluous language in number 3 referring to CMD1 and CMD2 districts, which are either gone or about to be gone from the ordinance. I guess as an aside right there, I missed that from my list of districts. CMD2 also still exists, and it is intended to be replaced with the core residential district. But, and originally when we were doing the downtown zoning amendments, we were just going to change the language of CMD to be to be the new CMD district. I know I'm like talking about all different acronyms here, but and not have to add another district to the ordinance. But when we realized how much the then city council didn't like the core residential district, we figured, well, we better not do that, because we might never get that land rezoned. That's CMD2 right now. Even though the names are different, core residential and CMD2 are basically identical districts. And so you have that there. In the future, it's the land, for example, along West Jefferson off of Main is zoned that way. It's intended to allow a mixing of homes and offices. And in the future, it's supposed to go away as well and be completely eliminated from the ordinance. In any event, the parking regulations are already addressed in the downtown
Was that
district.
that one where Penny was going off and,
Yes.
thank you. Okay.
And then, again, number 6 on page 17, that's redundant of language that's in the supplemental regulations that relate to the downtown districts. So we don't need to have it in here a second time. Other than that, we just renumbered. And then BRD2. So BRD2 is the area up around Anderson Court and generally in the northwest corner of the city. And we found that that district maybe wasn't as inclusive as we would have liked with some of the uses that wanted to go in there. We had to use over and over the other similar uses language that is provided for amongst the special uses in that district. So we first of all, just tried to simplify it by referencing B1, as I had mentioned earlier. So all those things that were 1 and 2 should come in via the B1 uses, the exception being theaters. I didn't feel like theaters would be appropriate up there. We added artisan workshops, which is something that we've talked about wanting to allow up there, whether or not associated with retail sales of items made on the premises. And that is it so far. So if you've got other good ideas, you can tell us, and we'll
Do we still have secretarial training anywhere?
have what?
Secretarial training anywhere? We'll have
Do,
secretaries
does it actually
anywhere.
exist, you mean, or?
There's yeah, is it a thing still? Because it's mentioned in here in a couple spots, and I'm like, wow, welcome to the 1970s.
Yeah, that's called, I don't know, business school, technical school? I don't know what it's called.
Well, I'm wondering if update the
Yeah, we
language
did
on
have
it.
a
Technical
court
skills
reporting
might be
school.
something, I don't know. But nobody has secretary schools anymore. Or secretaries.
Business schools?
Thing, I don't know.
Does it say business schools? Which number is that?
You got it in a couple places.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I know it's silly, but it kind of dates
Oh, well,
us.
that's the purpose of this exercise, is to clean all that up.
I think I circled it and put ha ha ha, so I want to find my notes. Yeah, page 10 was one of them. Schools for occupation, so it's, right, you have technical training already, such as dance schools, music, voice schools, art studios, and then you have technical or secretarial training in other similar schools, and I'm thinking maybe time for secretarial training to.
Okay, got it.
And then it's in one more place. Not sure where, though. Not sure I circled that one. But it was twice in 2 different places. So wherever it is, second time.
Okay.
Oh, there it is, page 12, number 7. Where it's basically the same line. Same description. And it'd be cool if we had a dance hall come back into town, but dance hall days.
Yeah. Dance school. Dance
Oh,
hall
no.
is a little different.
I know, I'm just looking at 14,
Oh, 14?
yes. I'm not suggesting we take that
Oh,
out, I'm
dance
just saying,
halls, yeah,
not dance hall days.
yeah. Dime a dance.
Though I do think it's 2 words.
Wonder how much it would be today. Buck? Buck a dance?
Jim, a couple meetings ago, you mentioned that you had some things that you wanted to change to the ordinance. Are they reflected in this document as well?
Yes, this is one part, or the first beginning part, and then he kind of explained additional things that we need to address. This is getting in the right direction of where I was headed, so.
When do you think we'll see your changes or your
Well,
recommendations?
My recommendations were given to him and incorporated into this.
Okay.
There's additional documents that won't come in front of this board that I didn't realize wasn't this board's jurisdiction, that I'll be asking for to be changed at a different level, so.
Okay.
So the approval for this comes from us, and then council approves our recommendation after this?
Yeah, you hold a public hearing, you make a recommendation, and council takes action.
Okay, so if we want to address something like the garage door issue here on page 6, occupying more than 40% of the front facing of the building, should we be doing that now? Should we change that percentage?
Yeah, if you know what the percentage is that you want, just
Our
tell us
goal was
now.
to stop the garage house that we have in town now, where you got a garage in front of the house way behind. But I don't know that 40% is going to,
Well, like I say, that
Townhouses.
particular one would be, because of its orientation, it would be virtually 100% of the frontage as
Right.
as it's
Because
configured there.
whatever the setback for the second part of the house isn't frontage anymore, right?
Well,
'Cause I'm not
you know,
kinda
we can get
confused on
more
that.
sophisticated in defining that. Remember, when we originally were gonna do this, we were gonna, and Susie and I went out and took pictures of various homes, and we were, you never got to see those. We were gonna bring them in on a board for
Love to
you.
see those.
That might still be
I was
doable.
really looking forward to
Not
that.
by me, probably, but that might still be doable. And, you know, you can look at those things and decide, you know, which is offensive, which is not offensive, and how to define, you know, that problem. The one particular one that everybody refers to, you know, is amongst the photos that we took. And, you know, literally, it's a garage, and like the entry is back some number of feet. And so if you want to, you know, yeah, I mean, I guess we'd have to more particularly define what the front line of the building means, or the front of the building means to.
I think we would.
Absolutely. I'm sure that one would fail even this definition, but, you know,
But somebody
if you-
could
if you
easily say,
wanted
well,
to-
it faces the front, that's the front line.
Right, if you want to also get at the snout aspect, then, you know, you want to say something more about the front line, you know, defining the front line of the building.
'Cause
Well,
don't you have to say something?
my understanding is that house was built because the people were handicapped.
Yes, it's a barrier-free.
And can we do that? Can we eliminate handicapped people from trying to build a custom house?
You can regulate the size of the garage door on the front, and you can regulate the footage of how far the garage projects out from the rest of the house.
I see why they did it, just that it's not a good look for the rest of the people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, but no, you could not discriminate against a barrier-free house.
Presumably, there's multiple options for design options for,
Right.
I don't think that's the main use. I think it's more about shallow lots, right?
It was a narrow lot.
Narrow lot, I mean, yeah. I don't think that's the main rationale for those houses.
So you think we want to stay with 40%?
no?
Want to raise it?
I
75?
think Jim's recommendation of 25%
25?
might make more sense.
Yeah, let's do that. And if they have to, they would have to go for a variance if they wanted to.
And is that only relevant to new builds?
Yeah, well, it's not going to affect that house, obviously, unless it burns down.
I just know there are some ranches on my street that, I mean, their garages are more than 30% of their frontage. They're existing homes, though.
Okay, any other questions?
At 25%, you'd be basically eliminating a two-car garage, then, wouldn't you?
Well, in that configuration, right? I mean,
So if I was to build a ranch in Clawson and I wanted a two-car attached garage, I couldn't do that under that.
probably not, right?
I think that's 25% is low. I mean, I've seen two-car garages in front of, in the neighborhoods here, and they look fine.
I would assume that the builder could ask for a variance if he was so inclined.
Or is there just a different way to go about it that gets more at the whole snout house issue that we
Well,
were
right,
most?
this gets at the prominence of garage doors, right? It doesn't necessarily do anything about a
Layout.
snout per se.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could do side entry garage and have all the garage doors you want, but
Because it's
You know,
front, it's the frontage.
Right.
it's the
Not the
frontage that you're
sidage, not the
concerned about.
backage.
But your lots are relatively narrow for the most part, and many don't even have attached garages in the city. And, you know, and likewise, you know, if you're gonna put a detached garage behind your house, that's not gonna, this isn't gonna
Right,
affect.
this doesn't stop
This
it.
isn't gonna affect that either.
Right.
It's about the prominence of the garage door out front. I really just threw this in here for, you know, so we have a starting point for discussion. But if you want to get into the snout aspect, there are all kinds of ways of defining like the front line and how far it can be set back before it's not part of the front
Is there
line.
model language that
And-
that can be included
Yeah,
as a future
I mean, I don't know if it's
iteration?
model language, but there are variants on various kinds of language that attempt to get at the snout feature of homes. And if you want to go.
Because it's never as easy as saying you can't have a snout house and calling it good.
Right, of course And so, you know, I think we can go deeper into that. I just wanted to put something in here so that you'd have a starting point and we wouldn't forget about it as long as we were doing this cleanup work.
Could we go about it another way and talk about the depth of the driveway?
Well, what if you have like a detached garage behind you? You know, really, I mean, you're
Well, that's
saying
what I mean.
it
The
has to be
longer
a
is
certain
better.
depth?
The snout houses at the front are the ones that have the short drives.
Well, they have short drives, but they all have the same front setback, right? The snout can't
25
extend
feet.
beyond the front yard setback for the district.
Okay.
We
Well,
allow,
but it sounds like we're almost talking about two different things, because he's pointing out that if we do too small of a thing, somebody can only have a one-car garage. That's not the same as a snout house issue where it's protruding into the front. I mean, you could easily build a straight front whatever with two-car garage in a small section. So it's two different issues. You know, do we want our houses, new builds dominated by garage versus front door and, you know, porch? And then the second one is, do we want houses built that, you know, where the garage is right way out there and everything else is in the back? So,
realize we're defining it as garage door, not the front of the garage. So a garage, two-car garage door is 16 foot wide, 8 feet tall.
oh, so 16 foot. So how big would a house have to be frontage for 16 feet to be 25 or even 30%?
Well, if,
Like, I'm an accountant, I'm great at that math, I'm not good at geometry.
well, so on a 50-foot wide lot, you can probably, you know, if you're, have 5-foot setbacks on either side, your house can be 40 feet wide. And 16 by 8 if your front facade is 8 feet tall, so it, I don't have my numbers in front of me.
40% of a 40-foot wide house is 16 feet.
If you go with a one-story, but what we were addressing was the two-story houses with the garage taking up the front facade, so.
It would be a shame to require people to come get a variance for a very standard build of a two-car garage. That's just my opinion.
Well, and it doesn't make sense to have people get variances if we're going to constantly give them variances.
Right.
Right,
So
right,
that never
exactly.
makes sense. It's hard, again, since measurements go right over my head, I need visuals. I need to see a house where it's 40% and 25%, and here's what we're talking about. Samples would be, you know, do we have anything like that? Standard building design that gives us kind of a clue as to what we're trying to prevent and trying to encourage?
They had taken pictures to show you some examples of
Well,
the
for
standard
Pete's
building.
sake, when do we get to see these pictures? These things are almost mythically epic.
They're
now.
at Susie's phone, not mine.
I think there needs to be some language in
We
there
can-
that
yeah, we
states
can do
that where the garage is located on the property in comparison to the house and the size. I think that the language needs to be a little bit clearer and specific to that instead of just a standard percentage of frontage of the house. I mean, we drive around the neighborhoods and we can see two-car garages on colonials and ranches that are very conforming to the neighborhoods.
Right. And in essence, being more specific actually allows us to be more liberal in how we apply it.
I agree, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah.
Okay, and the other item that you seem to have a question on is veterinary hospitals, page 11, that any pet runs are set back at least 100 feet from a budding residential district. Is that a problem? Is 100 feet enough?
Well, you said nothing would ever
Well, so
qualify
currently it's
then.
the building has to be set back 100 feet, and I, like, you know,
Nowhere in
those-
the city we can do.
there's no,
so
probably nowhere
You
that
essentially
you would
said you can't
have
have
a
a pet
conforming.
run.
Well, and so the pet run, you know, you don't have to have a pet run necessarily, right, to have a veterinary facility. I mean, have them in strip malls.
Well, I'm
So-
not taking mine to one that
I wouldn't either, but I'm saying, you know,
So
they
I don't wanna
exist.
put
You're
them not-
you're
we're
not
interested in-
precluding them from existing by only regulating
But we're
the pet run.
discouraging them from coming here.
Yes, you're, yes, and,
So in alternative, can there be some requirement for a taller something.
Well, what does Kimball's have?
Yeah, I don't even think they have one.
They don't have a pet room?
I don't
think
believe
so.
they do.
Well, pretty sure they don't. So is there an alternative, or just change the footage, or, I mean, what are we worried about? What's the 100 feet for, barking dogs? What's it trying to? what's
Yeah,
it
well,
attempting to-
again, I just modified it a little bit, but I assume that's what the idea was originally, was that it would be disruptive because there would be barking dogs in there.
Right.
And you didn't want it too close to residential district, but, all these districts, the B1 district in general is close to residential districts, that's what it's for.
Have we had any problems or complaints about that, Jim? Residents was complaining about dog runs next to their house?
Yeah, usually in the residential districts, when people put them up in their side yards to annoy their neighbors, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They intentionally do it, so.
Can that be moved to a different district?
Well, yes, but again, your districts tend to be just strips along,
Yeah, those dumb questions.
along the main roads, right?
Yeah.
And so they're kind of all similarly situated in that regard. There's not a lot of depth to work with. Jim, are there any other veterinarians besides Kimball?
No, this was, what I was referring to is in the residential district, people with their dog runs.
Right,
But I haven't had any commercial dog run issues.
Well, we became
22
aware of
years.
this when that little house down on South Main that was a real estate office, maybe it still is, was for sale for a while though, and somebody wanted to put their vet office in there, and that was precluded by this provision.
That's a shame.
Okay.
'Cause the house was within 100 feet of the residential district, which I would say every building in all your commercial districts is within 100 feet of a residential district.
I mean, we could eliminate the setback requirement, 100 feet, and just ask for, if someone wanted to put a dog run in or for overnight boarding or whatever, and ask for a variance on whatever they're doing. That way we can evaluate case by case.
Well, as I say, they don't, if you actually had outdoor kennels, right, you wouldn't, that's probably going to be problematic in any of your commercial locations.
But that's different than a veterinary clinic.
Well,
Yeah.
some vet offices have outdoor runs, right?
Sure.
And especially, and they tend to do boarding as well, in conjunction with veterinary offices. And so, what I'm saying is, if really any location in any of your commercial districts, if you had outdoor runs, that probably is going to be a problem, right? I don't know that much about how the veterinary business works, but I assume as an alternative to that, what they do is they individually walk the pets that aren't, in there for care, which the ones that are in there for care, they keep crated, I think, for the most part.
This might not be a city that lends itself to the kind of vets that want to have boarding and a dog run.
Yeah.
Or we move that use to an industrial district.
Well, that's what I
Industrial,
thought.
yes.
I said, can we move
Yeah.
that to a different district?
Yes, right, and so that's what I'm saying. So the commercial districts, I don't think any of them would accommodate that. Possibly, I don't know that there is any space in there, but within BRD two or within industrial, those lots are potentially large enough to accommodate something
And
like
is
that.
that a use over, and without me turning the pages, is that a use
I
that
don't
we've already
think so.
allowed?
I don't think so.
So maybe that's something.
It
we
is
should do.
only because I just now referenced all permitted uses in B1 in BRD two, but if you get rid of it in B1, then no, it won't be anywhere. So you could have in B1 veterinary hospitals, but excluding outdoor runs.
Right, and then we
In
could have,
BRD two,
yes,
you could say
but we're
with
supposed to be getting
outdoor
rid of
runs.
or,
No, BRD
oh,
one.
BD2 is, yeah, sorry,
BRD one you'll get rid of.
Right.
BRD two you'll keep.
right. So I would.
And it'll
I
be
like that.
called BRD.
Any other questions? So this will be coming back to us it'll be cleaned up and for our approval at some point?
Are we supposed, if we have any comments or anything else,
Yeah,
are we
I
supposed
think,
to
you
email
know,
or?
take it home and,
Right.
see what else you think we ought to be working on at the same time. It's a fairly involved exercise, amending the zoning ordinance. You don't want to do it every day, so if there's other stuff we should be addressing and/or cleaning up, now's the time to do it. I will say that the sign ordinance is amongst the things that needs to be substantially cleaned up.
That's not in here though, right?
That's a separate chapter, that's 36. I did not embark on that task yet.
And then we'll have to work on the chicken ordinance when council decides if you're going to have chickens in town or not.
Don't be knocking the chickens.
I'm not knocking them.
I'm teasing.
Okay, if we're done with that, let's move on to agenda item number 6, discussion regarding the Planning Commission technology needs.
Well, I wish Susie was here, but Jim's here, so you can, that was me. I requested that that got put on. Because after we sat, I was listening to the budget workshop meeting where they talked about planning and heard the cost, and actually, Michael, you were in that meeting, so anything I say, you should remember. But I remember when you said the number, I went, holy cow, comparing to all the other things that is competing for, and I thought, do we really need them? Oh, you're not even with me, are you, on this one? Okay, you're looking at me, yeah. You see, I think you tossed out something like $9,000.
Well, that was not just for PC, that was.
ZBA and PC.
But then I thought in that meeting, they said, well, ZBA really doesn't need them because they only meet, once or twice a year, and I thought that was tossed
Mario?
out.
Give him the microphone.
And then what was left,
He's got one on.
I had it, sorry, I forgot I had it on mute.
what was left was, so maybe I didn't understand, I thought the 9,000 was still what was left.
That was the extremely high end, based on what type of system we might want to get. That was the high end. And then it could basically be if you have a Chromebook, I mean, you can find models for $150 or whatever it is. So that would, of course, shrink it down because the intent would not be for you to have them at home. They would just stay
Correct.
up at the dais.
Correct.
ZBA PC would have access. They'd log in and you'd see all your site plans, all your packets, whatever it might be there. So you'd have 9 for PC ZBA, and then you'd have the additional 5. Attorney would get one. Manager would get one. Jim or Susie might need one. I don't know. I think they have their own. So that's where it was paring it down. So it could have been less. I just wanted to go like high end. And then if you have the ancillary items of the the package, to store it or whatever, or keyboard or a mouse or anything like that. But it was the high end. Yes.
That was the high end.
Yes.
And I also know that there's 1 or 2 members, one of them who's not here, but has said a few times, just loves the paper.
Yes.
So if we then put all the expense forth of that, and then you've got people that still want paper anyways, I'm not against it.
It's the same here. I'm not anti-technology, and
I don't believe it
But
was
you still
approved
like-
in the budget.
No, it was not
Right.
approved.
Oh, it
I get
wasn't
it on
approved?
my iPad, and I read it at
So we
home.
are not getting them, so it's a
No.
non-issue.
But to perform.
Why didn't
Unless you
Susie
wanted
just tell
them,
me that
then
when I
it's an
said
issue.
put it on there?
It is projected to go on the capital improvement for next year to be brought back up if they want to do it.
Okay.
This year, their agreeable item was to pay you, which was another item.
Well, you all got my email on
Yes.
that one.
That was said, okay, don't do the technology. We did do the emails, so that was a part, that was a cost
Yeah, I was
that we had
stunned
to
at the
do.
cost of that, too. That was the other thing that went
Yeah.
into my, holy cow, with that expense plus, it just seemed
To have the licenses, to have that through that, it does have a cost to it.
$1,000 extra or something.
Yeah, to have each person with that. So yes, the discussion was then just to pay you, but I know that brought up other auditing, other issues like that. So we'd have to treat you, if you so choose, you have to do all the paperwork and you have to go through all the process to actually be an employee.
And I apologize if that messed anything up for anybody, but I heard that and I knew that what was being said was, no, wrong.
Well, what's the cost? Do we know what the cost is of the printing and mailing the packets to all the boards?
It really depends, because some packets, it could cost,
There,
it depends on how big the plans are. Anywhere from probably, $3 up to, we've had some that have been up to like $9 the thickness to mail them out per person.
Right.
So that's twice, you know.
What we have done in the past, they would print it up, put it in an envelope, and the police officers would drive around and just deliver them, saving us the
Yes,
postage
that's
cost.
not happening anymore.
They didn't like that? They weren't feeling post
We've
officey?
stricken that language from their union contracts.
Not part of their duties?
No.
Okay. Maybe we could find a city employee or something, an intern or something.
Well,
to-
we've been emailing them.
Yes,
now.
and that-
So then
it-
you just, you know, it's really just a printing cost for those who want a
Right.
printed packet when they.
I just find it much easier
But it's not
for
in the
myself
budget
to
in
work
any
off
event.
printed copies.
So it's a non-issue, so
The only
I take
item
that
that is
off.
in the budget is to pay, for pay. They wanted to pay up to $600, but then we would have to get all the paperwork for you to all pay for that.
And we, of course, have the option to just say, no, we prefer to just continue volunteer on
believe
an
so, yeah.
individual basis.
That, I
and
mean,
that's
it's
fine.
clearly a conflict of interest to be a paid employee when you're sitting on the board. You can't.
Council is
rule.
paid as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, county commissioners are too.
Yeah.
It's the way
It's
the
not
code,
uncommon to
It's
get.
not
it's the way it's
Yeah.
written. It's
Per
way
the,
law is
actually,
written.
per the charter, they can
What,
agree
like a
to pay the
W-9?
What's that?
A W-9, like, okay.
So you'd have all your the
Not an
FICA and all
employee,
the
but a
taxes taken out.
contractor. Okay.
You'd be, however, the contractor, I forgot what the IRS term is or whatever.
Well, it's not an independent contractor.
Yeah, it's not that, but it, I remember in your extensive
what it-
email with your background, you know that.
That was cute.
Yeah.
So what is it? I mean,
I don't know. how to
you said
pull
it's
it
a
up in the
W-9,
memo.
that is an independent contractor.
It's not an independent contractor.
Sorry, it's not.
a-
It's, I don't know the exact.
It's
Do they
a,
get a 1099? Is that?
no, they get a
No.
W-2. That was the
That's what it
issue.
is.
They were
Okay.
in the budget meeting, they were just left it with, okay, so we're going to 1099 them, and, you know, if it's, what they were saying was if they get paid less than 600, they were making the assumption that
It
we are
wouldn't
treated
file.
under the tax code the same as any person whom is not as an employee, like at any other place where they make less than 600, you wouldn't have to issue a 1099. And, you know, given my job, I knew that was wrong, and so I sent an email explaining how and why that was incorrect under the Internal Revenue Code.
Great,
not
that
city
means that they
code.
probably won't pay us now.
Well, that was why I just apologized.
That's what I would
But
do
then
if I was
again, you would also be getting in trouble potentially with the Internal Revenue Service if you failed to report that correctly. So I was trying to protect both the city and us.
Yes,
Appreciate that.
She was. I defer to her knowledge.
We had talked before about just having internet access in here and we bring our own devices.
Yes, which we have, and the intent, that's why we're doing the council e-packet, which was the long-term goal of having Chromebooks or a type of thing up there, because then you can access the e-packet if you're here, if you don't want to print it or you forgot to bring it or whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, you're more than welcome to bring your own tablet or whatever you have.
But
every
is there
time.
internet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's Wi-Fi here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I've just been hotspotting from my phone.
For
Yeah,
some-
me too.
And for some reason, Dave told me it doesn't come in well in this room. I'm not sure why.
The Wi-Fi.
There's two,
Yep, it's in the
That's
lobby.
good to know.
I believe there's two hotspots, right? I believe. Yes.
That's why your access is so good.
So I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I mean, all I saw was that, and I just thought if that somehow we could give our input onto whether, but that's.
No,
a
I guess
moot
the
point.
input now could be, do you see a use for it for next year's budget? I guess that is my question back to you. It's not this year's budget.
I think it
It's
depends
not-
on the big package of what happens next year, what the needs and wants are, and where we are. I just knew listening to that whole conversation, I mean, there was already tight things, and it just seemed like,
Yeah.
and I wasn't against it. I'm not against the notebooks. I do bring my phone, and I bring my computer, and I'm perfectly content using my own stuff. I know Mr. McHale prefers paper, and doesn't care for technology. I know everybody is different, so I don't know. I'm just saying, is the expense worth it if only one or two people care? But then again, people change. New people come on. Depends on what you decide you can afford as a city. The way you were talking about it in the meeting, it seemed like you were talking for planning commission. So you're saying they would just be up here permanently, and anybody sitting in the seat accesses that?
Yes, the
So
only
it's not
difference would
a-
be council would have their own, because they have their own.
Right, they have separate.
So
and they
that's
would-
what,
they
I
would
guess that's
get-
the part I thought was kind of,
Yeah, basically what PC and ZBA would have, they'd probably lock them up, when they're not here, so we'd have the 9 available. And they would be more general tablets of some sort, whereas the council would have a higher, because they would actually have keyboards and.
I'm only going to
would
speak
use
for
that.
myself. I don't need one and I'd just use my own technology. And now that we have our email addresses, I would just continue to call it up on my own stuff.
And
So,
that's,
I'll wait to see what the technology looks like next year.
There you go, that too.
It's changing constantly, so.
But we will continue with doing the e-packets. That is.
Is
the
everybody
goal.
tuned into their city email address
Mm-hmm.
now?
Yep.
I believe so.
No?
You don't have one yet, maybe.
I don't think so.
Nope, you do.
No?
I just probably didn't email you till, since you're newer.
Okay.
You do have one. It's your name dot your last name, I think is how they all were done.
Yeah.
At cityofclawson.com. But I'll email your other email. to
Is it
let
on
you know.
Outlook?
Thank you.
It's just
It's through
Gmail.
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 So you just go to Gmail and, once you know what your address is, you can.
You can add it on Outlook, Annie. I did to mine.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So is there any future technology needs that you might want or to look into, or you're content with?
I have nothing comes to mind.
I'm willing to sit and wait and see what happens. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I brought this up last year or the year before that I don't think the city should be footing the bill to do these packets and mail them. So that's where we started talking about this originally a while ago. And so that I think that we can figure out the technology needs independently, but I think we really should look at the expense the city is
Which
incurring.
we've gotten rid of that now. So it's everything's just
So
email.
nobody's getting these. Okay.
I don't believe you're
mail,
sending out.
I
No.
think.
Okay, good.
If
Yeah.
if Mr. McHale wants it, I believe he's
Well,
printing
but
out
I
on
think
his
she's
own.
been printing them and bringing them here
Yeah.
instead of mailing, and he's fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't think he's complaining about that at all. He was just saying, once he got here, he preferred to have a paper copy.
Well, if they were set up for us and this stacked up here someplace, I mean, if we could come out on a Thursday evening or something, pick it up and.
Yeah, anything.
I like
mean,
having a
they're not being
copy for
mailed,
the
though, which
weekend.
was an expense. It was unnecessary, and I
Yeah,
agree.
it was, yeah.
I agree.
I just like having a hard copy to go through over the weekend and making notes on it.
Right.
Keep you track of it. Okay, if we're done with technology, we'll move on to public discussion, items not on the agenda. Anyone from the public wishing to say anything? We have public.
DDA. And I'm here because a planning commissioner asked if I would be mentioning this recognition that the DDA just received this week, which was that we met the criteria and performance standards as a nationally accredited Main Street community, which is something that is given by the National Main Street Center, which is a division of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So actually, this is the 7th year in a row that we have been accredited. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is I really want to thank you all, because the downtown and the DDA don't exist in a bubble. We're one part of the whole, and you all are a great part of that. So whether it is the downtown master plan or the design guidelines, we appreciate your input in taking part in all of those things and leading to the accreditation. So thank you. I also want to mention that a long time ago, we mentioned that we would be doing some silhouette public art. That is a project that is half done. We ran into an engineering change that we have now completed, so that will be going up this summer. Also, we have not had a quarterly meeting in some time. So I'm going to be sending a request to the planner and to Jim to see if you all would like to meet again, to just have a session to talk about what's coming up and maybe to discuss some possible public art policy, because we are going to have some other art things coming up. So that was about it. So again, really just a thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
I see nothing else, so I'll close public discussion and we can move on to other business.
As the board might have noticed, we have a Mario Ortega here. He's a planning consultant from McKenna & Associates. He will be taking over Greg's duties in the future. Mario, go ahead and start with your background and
right.
tell him what you do.
Yes, good evening. As Jim mentioned, my name is Mario Ortega. I've worked with McKenna for quite a long time, so I have some pretty vast experience doing planning. I started at McKenna in 97, straight out of school. Worked there for about 5 years, and then I decided to move to Chicago. So I was a planner in Chicago, did work there in Chicago and Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana. But recently I moved back to Michigan. I was born in Detroit, born and raised here, went to University of Michigan, so I wanted to come back. So I've been back with the firm since about 2013, And in that time, I've been working throughout the state. Most recently worked at Village of Lake Orion doing on-site services. Had a lot of experience dealing with the day-to-day operations. And then I've also worked in city of Williamston, out closer to Lansing, and also providing them with day-to-day services in addition to staffing their planning commission and their ZBA. And so with regards to that, I have actually a lot of the issues you guys were talking about tonight, I've had to deal with recently. In Williamston, we were dealing with garages, and we were dealing with the setback requirements, trying to make sure that the percentage is not overbearing, and that has a lot to do with the mass. It has a lot to do with the architectural style and design elements that you can include. But you can also do different regulations that allow for flexibility. Usually it's the relationship of the garage door to the front elevation, sometimes allowing it to step back a little bit or forward. That addresses that. And then we have also dealt with, as Greg mentioned, it's a challenge in the city right now because your commercial corridors are in very close proximity to your residential. So if we're making that, protecting those, that relationship between the two can be pretty challenging. But there are different ways to buffer it. And a lot of times that has to do with utilizing special use and then also utilizing design requirements. So for example, with the veterinary versus boarding use issues, if that was a special use, then the site design could maybe have the buildings separated from or used as a buffer between the garages, the pet runs and the adjacent residential, because then the sound would be buffered by the actual structure. So there's all different kinds of solutions for you. So as Jim mentioned, at some point in time, I'll be assisting the city, and so I just look forward to that. I have my copy of my resume. I'll hand that out at that time when the meeting's done. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to fire away.
Hey, thank you, Mario. Any questions?
No, I don't have a question, but just a quick comment, I guess. And Mario, welcome. We're happy to have you. Welcome to Clawson. You might have seen some surprised faces up here because most of us did not know you were going to be here tonight or that this change was occurring necessarily. So I guess I just want to take a second to, and I know that this was discussed at a past meeting that I was not at, and that there was a special council meeting that I also was not able to attend, so I feel a little out of the loop with the conversation. But I guess I just want to say that it's still unclear to me why this change is being made, why Greg is no longer our planner and we have a new planner. And I have scanned the city council minutes from the meeting that they had, and it's still unclear to me sort of what has triggered this change. And I guess I just want to say that personally, I've been very happy with Greg's performance here, and he's been an excellent planner for the city, and I'm not clear on what has gone on, and I feel like there's been very little or zero communication from council to this planning commission that is responsible for planning and works directly with the planners. So I feel a little blindsided and disappointed that has happened. But again, this has nothing to do with you, and we are, we're happy to have you. But I guess I wanted to say that for the record since I missed the last meeting. I don't know if there's any explanation to be had at this point from staff.
It would be
or council.
inappropriate for city staff to comment on actions of the city council, so.
Okay, is there meeting minutes or anything where the decision was made or a conversation was had about what the reasoning is
That
you're aware of?
If you watch that workshop that they had.
I couldn't find it. Is the video on there?
It is.
It is.
It's the budget workshop where I heard about the 9,000 for the computer things.
Okay, I saw the budget workshop. I didn't see the special session
Oh,
that was the
that.
22nd.
There's a workshop after that
for.
also that has an opening statement that gives an explanation.
Okay,
And that's the one that was prior to the last planning commission meeting that went online then?
Correct.
So, because it wasn't online.
no, I looked yesterday and I couldn't
Okay.
find it.
Yeah.
Unless I'm looking in the wrong spot.
That's not
It's
on
not
there.
online?
No, because I've looked several times and I checked
It
today
was
too.
recorded. I don't know that it's online.
And also, I mean, it's
Dave.
You said it's inappropriate for staff to comment. That's great. I'm not staff. I get to comment. I did go over those with a fine-tooth comb. In fact, I have several notes, and I have an abundance of questions because there was multiple references made in that budget workshop to meetings that were held and votes that were, or consensus that was done with the planning, or I'm sorry, with the commissioners, that is nowhere to be found in minutes, public video, or anything. And the content, a lot of the content of what they were discussing should have been under the Open Meetings Act and should have been public. So I'm frankly looking at the FOIA request right now that I'm putting together to say, where are all these minutes? Because as far as I'm concerned, the process through which this happened, regardless of the outcome, again, has absolutely nothing to do, but the process through which this has happened, and after looking at everything and not being able to find records or minutes, I find it kind of appalling for a small town like us, where and especially since we pay a lot of money for our attorney that's supposed to, I would assume, be making sure that those things don't happen. So, yes, I did pay close attention, watched it 3 or 4 times, took copious notes, word for word, verbatim to the parts, and there's constant references to things that should, under the Open Meetings Act, should have been done unless there was a request for a private thing, and I don't believe there was one. So, I'm not done with this. Just FYI. Sorry, Michael.
I'll just do my job. All right.
Any other business?
I have other things going on. Did a final building inspection on Osaka Japanese restaurant. They are ready to open up. They are planning on opening up after the 4th of July. So they have a few items to take care of and straighten out with the health department first, but it's very impressive on the inside. So. And they had a historic picture of the pagoda, and just the similarities from the original design to this building are it's amazing. So, your next planning commission meeting, you will have 3 show cause hearings. 6:30 North Main, Ms. DeSantis' office. 234 or 235 South Main, Tavern on the Main, and 1238 Anderson Court, Western Global. That's all, they've all been called before for show cause hearings, and either gave an explanation and said that all the work was going to be done by this time frame or not. So I will not be at that meeting. I am out of town for that meeting, so I wanted to give you guys a heads up with regards to that. And then Bayless Auto Repair, they have obtained face brick, where you just glue it onto the front of your building and change your building from, he currently has a gray painted facade, and wanted to install face brick. And I said that since we were looking at amending the ordinances, I'd bring it in front of this board and get your feelings on that. Currently, right now, if you change the look of the building or change the materials of the building, it is a major facade change, and he would have to go through full site plan review to put the face brick on the building. That's that part that we were talking about on the windows. So I got in trouble for allowing this at a party store on North Rochester Road, 3-4 years ago? Yeah. And we've been walking them through the process. They've installed dumpster enclosure and redid some of the landscaping, but they still haven't pulled down their pole sign, which will be another issue here shortly with the sign ordinance changes. And they still haven't done their parking lot. So it's, if I get a unanimous from you guys who hear that you have no problem as a planning commission allowing the face brick to go up on that building, then we'll look at changing the ordinance to address that in the future. But if you, any one of you has an issue with changing the look of the building to another approved materials without going through site plan review, then I'll advise Troy to hold up on installing those.
Part of the problem that I've had was in the past is if we have a building that's in bad need of repair, it's hard pressed on the owner to make repairs without forcing a site plan, which costs him a ton of money. And I was trying to streamline some way of doing that. But then the other problem you have is you allow them to do a minor change, like fix up the front of their building, and the building doesn't get a site plan. And that building could have gone for 20, 30 years without a site plan approval, correct?
Correct.
So that's the reason for the site, for the making the change. So I don't know how we feel about that. Do we allow them just to clean up and paint and change and not do a site plan?
Well, the other thing you gotta consider is, you know, how do you define what that is, right? I'm thinking about Laundry Palace, you know, they made a change to the front of their
Took the
building.
awnings down.
We're not so happy with how it looks right now.
Right.
So if that's, you know, if you define it too broadly, you know, it could include some substantial steps backwards in the process.
Right, but that change wasn't approved by the building official, right? That was just, they just did that as a stopgap.
Well, it was in the sense that they had to take the awning down because it was a hazard. He did approve them taking it down.
Right.
But, you know, fortunately, in that case, we had,
There was structural issues that I allowed them to take it down.
Right.
fortunately, in that case, we had a site plan that they were then no longer in compliance with. And we were able to say, well, now put it back or else come back with your new plan. By the way, still not done, but, yeah, I don't know if we can show cause them yet because they don't have an approved site plan yet, but, you know, you don't want to define what these things are so broadly that, you know, as has already been mentioned, you don't ever end up with a site plan, or you can make changes to structures that are inconsistent with the approved site plan, and then, like, you know, and is it fair to allow changes to be made if there isn't an approved site plan, but if you have an approved site plan, then, you know, now you can't change the front of your structure? It should be consistent as between those two scenarios. In other words, minor enough that it would be allowable in either case, even if you had reviewed it. And, you know, you put some amount of thought, and it depends on the district, right? There are some districts where you have development standards and where you have criteria for what the architecture should look like, and there are some that you do not. And maybe it makes sense to distinguish between those two things. If you don't have, you know, if a building elevation has kind of come before you, but you don't have no standards by which to review it, other than you think it looks good, you know, then, you know, should you really be inquiring into what those changes are? You know, I think you gotta define the standards first before you can decide whether or not a change is inconsistent with your standards.
There should be something in between allowing business owners to make facade changes and then on the other extreme, have to go through a full site plan approval. There should be something, maybe it is design standards that we establish or whatever it may be, but we don't want to get in the business of not being business friendly either, right? But at the same time, if we allow facade changes, brick veneers, simple things that more likely probably are going to look pretty good, but yet there's going to be that one time where you're going to get a disaster out there. So there's got to be some type of middle ground that we can establish here, so.
Is the building material that they're looking at approved building material? Is it glue? They're gonna glue something on? That's what they want to do?
Yeah, it's just the glue onto the existing structure, and then you put grout in between the bricks. So it's thin, what he described to me.
It's a Glengarry brick.
He didn't use that term, no.
I mean, I'm looking at the building, there's not much places to put brick on. It's mostly garage doors, right?
Doors and windows,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, are they talking the whole thing or just that, some part of it, or?
We were talking about the gray painted area.
So the pink thing would stay the same?
Well, he would cover that with the face brick.
Okay.
What's the address again?
Bayless Auto Supply.
Oh, it's Bayless.
Yeah, it's 540 South Main, if you're looking it up.
So can he do that now, or are you saying he can't do it without our approval?
My interpretation of the ordinance is he can't do it unless he goes through full site plan review still, even, well, with our existing ordinance and including the changes.
But you're saying that that's something we should potentially also be looking at?
Well, that was what I
Could be.
suggested. I don't know if he suggested it or
So
not.
you're saying that's something we should potentially be looking at?
Right.
Okay, that maybe we come up with, but he was saying more incremental, not all or nothing kind of thing. I don't know if that's what you were getting at.
Right.
When the DDA was recreated about 15 years ago, they put in very strict
Right.
requirements to force people to improve their buildings and their sites.
Just in the DDA district?
No, but the section where it defines what goes in front of the planning commission, that's where it was put in. This section was put in during those time periods. That's why it said you couldn't add a window without going through site plan review. You couldn't change the look of the building without going through site plan review. And it was very successful. As you can see, our downtown is very successful and still getting awards today. So.
Well, that's kind of the catch, I mean, you want to be business friendly, but then attracting good businesses and a quality downtown means those businesses have to maybe do some things they're not excited about sometimes, cost-wise. But again, that's back to his point, is there an increment, right now it sounds very all or nothing.
Well, I think that's the thing, is like maintenance and repair should be allowable. If you're talking about a change to facade, then I think that does trigger a site plan.
So you think that this should come in for a site plan since he wants to put glue on brick?
It's not in keeping with the architecture of the area, would be my concern.
Under our current standards, I don't think we have a choice but to make them have a site plan approval.
Correct.
When was,
He was suggesting he tell them to hold off? That's what I
Well,
heard.
I'm going to tell them it's site plan review unless you guys gave me the green light, and I was saying we were going to change, in the changing of the ordinance, that he could proceed, and we'd change the ordinance to catch up to it.
But right now, we don't even have anything in here on the table to change it that way.
Correct.
So
Yeah, we have to look into that and.
that seems
make changes
awful.
in
I
that.
mean, like, you're putting them out there for quite a long time. That could take months.
Yeah, it takes years and.
I was going to say, so in this instance, I'm with you, whether we necessarily like it or not, we kind of have to require it based on our current rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, whether we want to, unless you think he's willing to wait the next year or two while we figure, whatever.
Well, it's be his choice whether to go through site plan review, pay for the architect's drawings, and.
Well, your
go in
advice is
front of
still
the
good
board.
then. He either is going to have to do that or sit tight and see what comes out of our process, which may or may not make that easier.
And he should know that we are considering something. We're going to consider a change here somehow.
But we can't guarantee it's going to meet, fit what he's looking for. So you're right. Your advice was good. It's up to him.
Okay.
You said that he hasn't ripped down his pole sign yet or done the parking lot improvements. What's his plan for that?
That was a different
That's a different
location.
guy.
Oh,
That's on
different,
North Rochester Road that I was not aware of this ordinance, and I let a painted block building put brick and stone facade on the outside of the building. It's Main Street Liquor.
Store?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it looks terrible, I think.
the signage or whatever, or the
of
new.
And is the Church of Clawson coming in front of us? I thought they were going to be back in front of us.
I have no documentation from the Church of Clawson.
Well, we have a plan that's kind of pending. The city manager was supposed to ask for some additional information from the engineering consultant. I don't know if he's done that yet or not. But
Okay.
Do we have a
Anything
ZBA? Are we
Yeah.
going to, do we have a ZBA next time?
yeah. Sorry.
What's our,
It's your friends from the new location of House of Optical with their variance request for not having a knee wall and the sign to retain a freestanding sign.
And
didn't we already give them guidance on that, though?
We required it as a condition of approval of the site plan unless they received a variance.
Okay, so this is the variance part.
This is their shot at the variance. Speaking of variances, I don't know if it was ever on your radar or not, but some months ago, Pep Boys was denied a variance to reuse their pole sign.
Yep.
And they've brought, is it just an appeal, Mike?
Yeah.
It's just an appeal. So
Right now.
it took, so because the ZBA meets so infrequently, the minutes weren't approved until just last month. And so then that's when the time for appeal begins to run from the time the minutes are approved. So they've now appealed that decision to the circuit court.
Yeah, I knew they were going to fight that.
I didn't think they were gonna because we talked at length about a conforming location.
I thought they just
for
come
them.
back with a new,
Or
because
a,
he
or
went
a
under.
lesser variance that would have
Right.
allowed them in a more appropriate location. And I thought they were
I
gonna
thought it
do
was gonna
that.
happen.
And yeah, and they may still, but they got a, 100 and, what is it now, 175 now? They can take a shot at, the way the appeal from the ZBA works is it's on the record that it was built before the ZBA, and so all you do is brief it, and you have a hearing in the circuit court, and the circuit court decides it. But it's limited, there's no fact finding, it's limited to the record made before the ZBA.
Noble Appliance, are they on a temporary yet? I think they are, I'm not sure of that, but
I believe they are, because I don't believe there's any landscaping installed
that's
out
what
front.
my next line was, yeah, they promised a lot of landscaping that hasn't gone in yet. They're doing good business and everything else looks good, but I
Mr.
believe
Window
they're still
there.
on temporary.
I'll have to pull the file and see what we got.
Check into that, yeah. It'd be nice if we could all know who's on temporary certificate of occupancies and how long they are, keep a running list of that.
Because a lot of them supposed to come up the end of May.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of
Is,
expected, I was surprised we had nothing on the agenda, expected all of those. We'd have something.
Marty Kopp's building at Liberty in Rochester, he's done not one single site improvement there. I know because I keep coming up Rochester and down Lincoln to get here.
Which building?
Marty Kopp's building, it's at the corner of.
Used to be a dry cleaner, now it's a workout place.
Oh, the
Southwest
CrossFit?
corner of
The
Lincoln
CrossFit,
and
yeah.
Rochester. Sinclair Antiques still
Saw
aren't
that
done, they
coming.
still own other trees in down there.
And there's still no mural on Tavern on the Main.
Nope.
And there's still a pole sign there too.
But there's a lot of flowers in front of the Citgo gas station.
There are.
Are there?
There are
Yeah.
annual
Yeah.
flowers.
Under the
I'm out of
sign.
town.
Look under the
Oh, I'm gonna have to go
sign, yeah.
look.
And
They
they're in
kind of
the
shot
ground,
real
they're not
low
in
on the
flower
bushes.
pots.
Maybe go in and say, wow, your flowers are lovely.
Yeah.
Give them some positive feedback.
Yes. Okay, if there's nothing else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Motion, support, roll call, please.
Ms. Fenton?
Yes.
Ms. Prowse?
Yes.
Ms. Scripture?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Audia?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.